folks, welcome to 2025. I hope that you all had a great New Year's Eve. I hope that you're able to celebrate the winter holiday season in a context that you got to enjoy. And if you didn't, I understand completely. I've been there on multiple occasions. It sucks. And I hope that things get better for you one day. I want to take a look at how this upcoming year, is going to look for the United States, for people living in the United States. It is ethnocentric. I apologize for that. I'm coming from the perspective of being an American who's never lived outside of the United States ever in my life. And I don't know that that'll ever change, to be quite honest, no matter what happens. Okay, it depends on what Spirit has for me personally. Anyway, I am using the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot deck, and I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask Spirit. I'm up on a sticky note, so if you see my eye wandering over to a corner, it's because of that, okay? I haven't shuffled this for this particular reading yet, and I've not put in reversals, so let's do that right now. All right, there we go. And how this works is that I shuffle until Spirit asks me to stop. Okay, we're going to take a look at how January 2025 will most likely look for the United States of America, okay? January 2025. So, misdirected action, misguided behavior, energy spent in the wrong place. I'm pulling from the bottom of the deck. I've also got mind is at rest, so this is behavior. This is mindless behavior. Now, my mind is being pulled over to the Cybertruck attack on the Trump Hotel, I believe in Las Vegas. I'll tell you what, when I first saw the image, I thought that was like a photoshopped image. I didn't realize that was an actual news event. This is, I'm going to call it terrorism. I wonder if we're not going to see more acts of desperate terrorism taking place over the month of January. These are people who have an ideology to defend, but they don't think that deeply about it. These are people who just do as they feel. Fire can be extremely destructive when it's not contained to a bonfire pit or a fireplace, and these are events, these are people who will drag in others' lives, will injure others, will mutilate others, is what I'm getting specifically from Spirit, in order to further their ideology. There isn't regard for innocence when it comes to this, and this is also a very childlike energy. The page is a child, so this is not someone who is very mature. When they act, this is someone who is very reactive, if that makes any sense. So already not off to a great start. This is about an ideology of we were once a family. We got to take things back to how they once were kind of ideology. Again, this is kind of mindless. The mind is out of commission because this is all about emotions for the people who will be putting this kind of behavior out here. And I feel like this won't be the people who are enacting terroristic events. This is also just going to be the general attitude of where we used to be. We used to be like this in some mythological version of the United States that has never really existed. There have always been differences of opinion ever since the United States was first started, okay? This is not attainable. This is an illusion. This is a fantasy that cannot truly be had and has never truly been had. There's always been a second class, a third class citizenship that has been covered up by the people, by the oppressors in the United States. I don't know where I read this, where I saw this or heard this, but I heard or saw someone say that the United States has always existed on a slave class, has always been based on a slave wage class. We can look at our prison, at our guests of the state, if you will, and how their labor is used as if they are slaves and not people that need to be rehabilitated. Okay? We've got a choice to make. We can go this way, we can go that way. At this point, it's up to the individual on what choice that they're going to make, how they're going to behave. There is a sense of not mindful meditation right here. This person is not taking action. They are sitting with their choices, and they're not seeing with their physical eyes. They are choosing to use their intuition, symbolized by both the moon and the water behind this individual. The moon is out to, in my opinion, to show how the universe is absolutely guiding this particular choice if the person chooses to listen to their intuition. They don't have to. But there is a choice to be made here. It has not been made yet. This is up to every single individual, not just the people that I started talking about at the beginning of this reading, who might be just acting purely out of emotion and out of a childishness of taking us back to an image that never really existed. I'm getting the 1950s. I feel like a lot of people idealize somehow the 1950s, even though I think of the 1950s as a time of like type A personality levels of control, like pathological need for control. That's why you kind of get the blowout from the 1960s and the 1970s, is that wasn't sustainable. And for whatever reason, the 1950s are really being idealized here, when that depended on sharecroppers, for instance, that depended on Black Americans, Hispanic, Latino Americans, making lives for white people, for instance, comfortable. It meant that LGBT people had to be deeply in the closet or risk their lives. It was a nightmare for a lot of people to exist in the 1950s in the United States, dude. I mean, you don't have to dig too deep in order to see those stories. And for whatever reason, these people are idealizing an era. This is partly to do with white supremacy. This is partly to do with placing cisgender, heteronormative, those kinds of ideals up on a pedestal that never really deserved to be there to begin with. It was all based on oppression. We can choose what direction we want to go, but it's going to be up to the individual. This is Pluto in Aquarius season, so this is going to be much more about the collective, the individual, than it ever was about the monolithic authoritarian structures that we have started to leave behind with Pluto in Capricorn. I read somewhere that we're not going to be out of the energy of Pluto and Capricorn until 2027, because you still have those degrees in the chart. Pluto in Aquarius is still in the first degree right now. It's moving, but we're not utterly, completely out of the shadow of Pluto in Capricorn yet. And that makes sense. We're watching these structures fall down. And it does make sense that there will be people who idealize the structure, the monolithic, oppressive structure that has to come down. It's romanticizing something that didn't and doesn't deserve to be romanticized. For some reason, I'm getting the Wild Wild West and something about how, it was the good times back then. Never mind about the disease, the starvation, the exposure to the elements, for instance, how fucking rough it would have been to have been in the Wild Wild West. The risk of being shot and all that kind of stuff. So this is interesting. On top of the Page of Wands in reverse, I'm putting down the King of Cups in reverse. This is emotions utterly out of control. In the Thoth Tarot, this is water and fire personified. Ideally speaking, when water and fire work together, fire heats water in such a way that we can enjoy hot water, like, say, for instance, with a well-working water heater, for instance. When it's in reverse, that water heater explodes, and you've got hot water going all over the place, and it burns people. It has the potential to burn your property, your valuables, for instance. It has the ability to make a true mess out of your home. And I'm kind of getting that energy here. This is fire that has made an explosive. I'm getting steam. You know how you can get burned from steam? You don't have to touch fire in order to get burned by other things. This is a steam burn, if you will. These emotions are going to be running so hot that they actually do damage. Now, I should say that the Page of Wands is fire and earth personified. Again, if you look at the Thoth Tarot system. So fire, burn it all down kind of energy in the month of January for the United States. This is not going to be a fun time. Here's the thing. If you sense somebody going off the deep end, instead of trying to draw close and help them, it might be a better idea, but might be better advised to pull back from that individual. It might go against the grain of your willingness to help, to try to save a person from themselves, if you will. Keep in mind that people are their own worst enemies, regardless of whatever kind, loving heart that you may have. Even if you are an earth angel, an empath who wants to help, this might be the perfect time to shield yourself and be the King of Cups upright. To be the anchor for the people who are scared but aren't doing stuff, okay? Ideally, I would love to see people be an emotional anchor who says, sometimes it's good to sit down, sometimes it's good to take action, but in any case, you can be the warm water, the nice warm bath, so to speak, for people. In the sense of how soothing a warm, even a nice hot bath with some bath bombs and bath oils could be. And I'm definitely trying not to objectify anybody here, but think about how comforting a warm bath can be. You can be that, or you can choose to burn people. There is going to be this kind of, I'm wondering if like panic won't set in at some point during January. Right now, as I'm filming this, it's somewhat quiet if you don't take the terroristic attacks into consideration. And by the way, those attacks were absolutely symbolic, most especially the one with the Cybertruck in front of the Trump Hotel. Absolutely symbolic. Okay. We've got strength in reverse. This is going to require us to pull on strength reserves that we didn't realize that we had. This is going to require us to get into our most primitive survival kinds of aspects. When the world is burning down around us, who are we genuinely? With Leo, with that lion right there, we've got more fire energy in this particular reading. So who are we going to choose to be? I feel like a lot of people are just going to allow their inner beasts loose. They're going to say, fuck it, the world is burning down, so I'm going to help things burn down as well. This is someone who should have emotional mastery of themselves. This is someone who should be, in fact, a comfort to each other. In the upright position, these two cards would signify an incredibly emotionally grounded person who is so grounded that they inspire even the craziest individuals to settle down and listen and pay attention. These people have a calming, not even a chilling effect. They have a warming, sit down kind of effect. In reverse, it's the utter opposite. These are the kinds of people that you'll need to be cautious of. These are the people who are incendiary, who don't mind setting things on fire because it's entertaining to them. It feels like something needs to happen, so I'm going to do it, right? It's a very repulsive, reactive kind of energy that we've got going into January. And it's not going to be just an individual. It's going to be a variety of individuals. These are badly behaved people. They were always badly behaved, but the environment in January 2025 in the United States is going to be such that it sets them off in an even crazier level. Be cautious of those people. If you happen to know them, pull back, and if possible, this is the time to warn the proper authorities. At least warn them. Even if the FBI, all the other three-letter agencies don't pay attention like they seem to not do sometimes, you need to do your due diligence and warn them and pull back. Sometimes there is no saving people. There's just saving you and the people who are genuinely running scared. I have pulled the Two of Cups from the top of the deck. And it's interesting. It lands on top of the Ten of Cups. This should not be. Here's the ideology. Oh, we should be like this at a mythical time that never really existed, that depended on oppressing others to make things appear under control, smooth, growth, that kind of thing. This is the reality. An absolute disunity. Excuse me. This is going to be an utter lack of community. These are going to be people who are lone wolves, if you will. They're going to be looking for an opportunity, and they're most likely going to take it because they want to make their mark on society. They want attention. They're attention seekers in many ways. Go back to that Page of Wands in reverse, that childlike energy of someone who never got the attention that they felt like they needed. There's also the risk of main character syndrome right here. Someone says, I'm going to be the one to do fill in the blank. And there's not going to be anything that says, hold on, this is a wild beast out of control. The maiden has been thrown back, if you will, or the empress, really. This is another iteration of the empress. The empress has been thrown back because the animal is just thrashing out of control. Okay? There is no community. They don't give a shit about community. I'm going to go with lone wolf. Lone wolf, if you hear, or someone who at least thinks that they're a lone wolf and congregates with other people who think that they're also lone wolves, and that kind of, I'm getting this image of like gasoline and like the flames go between them and it gets crazy. It just gets crazy. Now, for whatever reason, this pops up with Elon Musk and wealthy people in general who are going to be watching this and be like, what the fuck is going on? But they're not going to be supported by the oppressive structures that they've benefited from for so long. They need a community of people underneath them to agree to carry wealthy people to their incredible wealth, and then to apologize for the wealthy people when those wealthy folks pull up the ladder behind them and say, well, yes, the community brought me up to this particular point, but I'm going to be the only one who gets to benefit from this. They're going to close up shop. They're going to run away. They're going to hide themselves. And I wonder if that isn't going to make things worse, because I wonder if it's not going to be, take this with a grain of salt, fun to chase them down, to hunt them. I wonder if people aren't going to say, well, they're not part of my community. What are they doing? All they've done is take money from me. It gives eat the rich. This is the time to stand back and let the universe do what it's going to do. Sometimes the universe uses pages of wands and other pages in reverse to do what it needs to do. I'm getting that trash taking out the trash kind of sensation. Indeed, the wealthy people of the United States have drained the middle class, have drained working class folks, blue collar folks, of all their resources and have given them little recourse. There are so many people struggling to stay alive, to stay fed, to stay housed. And there are a lot of people who are both unhoused, unfed, who are still struggling for even water, who are struggling to hold on to their mental health. It's the wealthy class who has also contributed to this downpour of bad luck, of incendiary, if you will. This is kind of perfect storm kind of feel to me, and I feel like January is just the start. So Spirit's saying no more shuffling, but to pull 3 more cards from the bottom. I saw earlier that the World was here. This is the end of an era. January confirms, to me at least, that this is the end of an era. This particular entity is about to finish jumping, dancing through this particular wreath, and then once that it's over, the wreath gets untied. There will be no going back to how things were after this. I've said in other readings how once things really, really start to get bad here in the United States, and keep in mind we've got Neptune going into Aries in March, and we've got Uranus going into Gemini in July. Once things really start rolling, I wonder if people aren't going to miss the old days of, we were so divided back then, but at least we could go to the grocery store without fear of being attacked. At least we could go to our families' houses without fear of being attacked. My battery is just drained. Please excuse me. Sorry about that. The wreath is going to be untied, and it's going to be a new United States. And possibly not even a United States of America anymore. You know, I've heard, I don't agree with Joseph Tittle's politics at all. On the other hand, he did see the United States becoming a place with 5 nations, breaking apart and becoming 5 nations instead of becoming one nation, being one nation. Again, I do not agree with his politics. I think that he says some really destructive things about people who are oppressed, for instance. And yet there were some things that really resonate right there. I think that we're going to start to see the end of the United States in January. We've got the High Priestess. And this goes along with the Two of Swords here. You've got a choice to make before this particular High Priestess. She holds a whole lot of wisdom. She holds the truth. And depending on what you ask her, depending on how you approach her, she's going to give you one answer or she's going to give you another. This is also about you, the individual, tapping very deeply into your intuition at this time, because this is not the time to allow panic, to allow your emotions to sweep you away. She is a kind person, but she can also be very cold. She is heavily personified by the Queen of Swords, someone who holds out her hand in welcome, but at the same time carries a very large, very sharp sword. Approach, but do so with respect and with caution, and if you come at me the wrong way, it's not a problem for the Queen of Swords, for the High Priestess, to cut a bitch down. Okay? It's going to be hard to tap into the truth because there's a lot of watery energy right here. She is surrounded by water in the background. My card doesn't show it very well. But both in the Two of Swords and in the High Priestess, it's going to be hard to see things clearly because the future is always in motion. People have free will. They have the ability to make choices. And when people make choices, things change just a little bit, even from the grassroots on up. When people make choices, things change. So that's for January 2025. Excuse me. I'm going to gather these cards up and then I'm going to reset a little bit and get ready for my next question. So earlier I described Neptune in Aries. That's an energy of idealizing war. Neptune not being able to see clearly, dreamy, idealistic, and Aries, the god of war, right? Of destruction, of soldiers, of bringing hell on earth through war. It's having an idealistic view of soldiers of, I keep getting The Purge, okay? And I never watched that movie. I don't know that I want to, because I feel like there are going to be people who idealize violence and they're going to use the movie The Purge as a way, What I'm upset with is people who take movies and use it as their worldview. It's not deep thinking, okay? Kind of like what you would expect to see with Page of Wands. Neptune in Aries starts in March, okay? The other times that we've been in Neptune and Aries, so the other time was during the American Civil War in the 1860s, okay? That was a war that permanently changed American history and continues to have effects to this day, in my opinion. We still see people defending the mutinous Confederacy. We still see people defending the use of humans as slaves, specifically black folk as slaves. There are still all the not even hidden, all the vestiges from that era are very much alive today. That era in many ways never ended. And if you look at time as not being past, present, as future, but you see it as it all being as simultaneous, that makes sense. In that case, the 1860s is still ongoing to this day. Well, we will go into Neptune and Aries again in March of this year. Also, with Uranus and Gemini, we're going into that in July. The last 3 times we were in Uranus and Gemini was during the 1770s with the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and during World War II. Every single one of those wars permanently changed how the United States functioned in the world, as well as its internal energy. Excuse me. Those are 2 energies, and then you've heard me talk about Pluto in Aquarius and how that started on November 19th in 2024. It's never had all 3 layers all at once. We've never had all 3 layers, all 3 astrological transits at once, ever in the United States. Let me double check my facts, okay? If I find something different, I'll put it up on the screen right now. But I'm pretty confident that we've never had all 3 transits going on at once, and 2025 will be the first time that that's actually happening for the United States. There's no way in hell that something isn't going to happen that doesn't fundamentally change not just the internal history for the United States, but for how the United States is placed in the world. No way in hell. With that being said, let me look at my sticky note. My second question is, what will the first half of 2025 most likely look like for the USA? Haven't shuffled yet. The reversals are still inside. I shuffle until Spirit asks me to stop. 2 on the bottom. We have an opportunity. This has something to do with making our bodies comfortable. It's not just about money here. It can be, but food makes us comfortable. Exercise, housing, being together with other people, being in communities makes us comfortable here. Now we can choose to take this particular pentacle and we can choose to walk into this gate right here, but behind that gate I see mountains. There are challenges. Even if we take this particular opportunity, this divine opportunity being given to us from the universe, there are still going to be challenges. We're still an incredibly divisive, divided, very incendiary, and it's like I'm getting this like golden retriever kind of, no offense to golden retrievers, but they're not deep thinkers, okay? They're not dogs that meditate and look out on their home and survey it with aplomb. They're happy, they're joyful. They're not deep animals, okay? It's kind of that energy that I'm getting with Americans, right? Not deep thinkers, very, very feely, but can also be, can bite, right? Have the potential to bite. We have the potential to make a stable home here in the first half of 2025. In spite of Neptune going into Aries in March, we still have the ability to make things relatively stable for us. The question is, will we take it? This is more of you can take this as an individual kind of way, but this is mostly meant to be on a national level. Communities of people are going to have to agree to make things stable as possible. Now keep in mind, if indeed the United States becomes no longer united, you're going to need to rely on these people who are willing to take the opportunity to make things stable. You're going to need to rely on those people to be a source of groundedness, if you will. I do see the potential for people migrating to areas of the United States that are more stable than the areas that will be more explosive. Like, I got Texas, where I'm from. I'm getting the South, where traditionally a tremendous amount of bloodshed, historically, a tremendous amount of bloodshed and pain and oppression has occurred. Okay? Not that I'm saying that that hasn't happened in other places of the United States, like with the indigenous folks of America, for instance. That has absolutely happened. But I'm really feeling like it's localized to Texas and the South and up the East. Excuse me. Yeah, that's the East Coast. Sorry. There is the real possibility that you'll want to move to a place where things are on a more even keel, where you've got people who are willing to welcome you to a place where there's some solidarity. You see how that is red and blue right there? This is going to be an area of the United States that is more comfortable with being purple. Okay? You're going to want to see people working together regardless of their political affiliations. I'll say for Texas, it's like people cannot talk for long at all before they get into politics. And I've seen people from outside of Texas complain about this. They'll try to move to the area, and all Texans want to talk about is some stupid fucking politics, okay? And eventually people are like, the people who move from outside Texas are like, I've had enough. I'm leaving. I'm going to a nicer place. And even though those people are Republicans, they can't tolerate Texas and places like it because it's just too divisive. Go towards this. Even if you might be moving into the area with people that you kind of disagree with, it's going to be more of a live, let live kind of situation. Not all of the United States is under attack. The United States has thrived on war and oppression and on keeping down certain groups of people for its entire history. It is founded on oppression and war. This will not be rewarded. It will not be blessed. Going forward into the future, Pluto and Aquarius, I believe this is the United States' Pluto return, if I'm not mistaken, okay? And the universe is not blessing how the United States has conducted itself. It has made things worse. It has gradually torn apart the republic that even the slaveholding founding fathers had. It has torn apart a foundation that was firm. This will not be blessed. This is going to be painful. This is karmic retribution. In the traditional Thoth tarot, there is an entity who has the scales attached to its head. And if the entity makes even the slightest movement, those scales move. And I'm getting an image of one scale being all the way down onto the ground and one scale being all on top, right? This could not be further out of balance, what we've got going on here. And going to places where things do feel more in balance is going to feel good, but justice will still reach those corners. And it's going to be about finding community in the first half of 2025 that's going to help you feel less of these effects. Places like Texas, now this is interesting. We had 2 major eclipses last year. One major solar eclipse in Texas that I myself watched. You can watch the short that I put up on the video almost a year ago now. That was important. In fact, I seem to remember a graph of the 2 eclipses that happened over Texas formed an X over Texas. X marks the spot, okay? I'm also getting with X, that's 10. That's an ending. That's the end of an era. That's the Wheel of Fortune, and it's in reverse. It's upside down. That's when the devil is on top of the wheel. It's time to pay hell back for all the shit for all the people that we've oppressed, all the shit that we've done. It's time to pay the piper. And this is going to be a nightmare. I do see a mass migration out of Texas for the people who really, really can't be here. LGBT people will have to leave. A lot of black folk will have to leave. The Latina folks, Latino folks, Hispanic folks will have to leave for better, higher ground, for more peaceful areas. And I'm probably speaking about Texas because, that's where I'm from. That's where I'm living right now, for better and for worse. I don't need to explain this to you too much. And look at what I said just a second ago. There's X. Ending. This is 10. You can't stab this particular corpse anymore. They're long dead. I have the Tarot Mucha. And in that particular 10 of Swords, the corpse is blue in the face. There's rigor mortis has been setting in for days, but this particular entity continues to stab it as if it's still alive. There's still so much anger to pour out even after the situation is dead. And that's what a lot of people are going to be getting away from, not just from Texas, but from the South. I know that Texas has a tremendous portion of the United States' population. That is going to drop off drastically. Now, Minnow Pond Tarot has described the 10 of Swords with that little hand right there. That's in benediction. I really liked how Minnow Pond Tarot described it. In spite of how drastically horrific this particular ending will be, in spite of how deep the betrayal will be, there's still a blessing in the sense that the end of an era is over. For a lot of people who will get to leave, the end of an era will be over. Also, keep in mind that the blackness symbolizes protection. Also, Minnow Pond Tarot pointed that out to me. I thought that was, well, not me personally, but I thought that really stood out. Black is the color of holy protection. It's why a lot of witches choose to wear black, why they burn black candles. It's a sign of deep protection. Also, see what's coming up in the background is a sunrise. The sunrise is chasing the dark night away. We do need darkness sometimes in order to show us how wonderful the lightness can be. But that doesn't mean that makes this any less of a nightmare. This is a backstabbing. This is a betrayal. This particular individual did not have those swords put into them from the front side. It's in the back. The situation will be over at a certain point, but I feel like this is just heating up for the first part of 2025. This is a very, very careful work. It lands on top of the Ace of Pentacles with the way I'm laying the cards out. Very careful work to making things smooth, run smoothly for all the people who will be migrating to the more stable states, if you will. This is going to take hard work, hard, careful labor from a variety of people, but this is one of the coolest nights, in my opinion, because they are so detail-oriented. They are willing to slow down. They're not ripping on their horses' bridles, making them go faster like you see with the Knight of Swords, with the Knight of Wands, for instance. They're chill. They still have a hold on the bridle, but the horse is in no sense of urgency. And there you've got the black horse again, a sign of benediction or a sign of protection, of divine protection, if you will. The knight is pretty chill too. Sometimes the knight moves, sometimes it doesn't. It does what is most wise. Now here the Knight of Pentacles is about earth and air energy, and with the upright position, that's not a bad place to be in at all. Normally those elements would be clashing, but with earth, that's groundedness. With air, that's going to be a mindful groundedness. This is an excellent card for those areas that people will most likely be going to leaving for calmer waters, okay? A lot of people will have to, because that will be the only way that they can survive. Pages of Cups. And isn't that interesting? It's landing on top of, this is normally my marriage card, right? This is a wedding getting started. But it's also about a stable place where people are able to just be and hang out and have reunions and barbecues and backyard parties and all that kind of stuff. There's going to be new things headed our way in those particular stable areas. This is absolutely not going to be all of the United States. Again, going along that whole divided line. Here, you've got those areas that have always been hotbeds for oppression and for violence against people who deserve it the very least, right? But right here, I'm not going to say, it's definitely a haven. No, I almost said heaven, but this is definitely going to be a haven for people. And people are going to be able to grow, start the emotional growth process. It will be a new era. This is still a child right here. This is going to be a whole new way of feeling. For a lot of people, they've never, they've never felt true stability because places like Texas and the South and a lot of the East Coast have been nothing but incendiary, have always been unstable. So coming into stable parts will allow parts of their emotional life to come out that did not feel safe to come out while they were living in those old environments. Okay? That's cool. I'm getting California. I'm getting a decent portion of the West Coast. Oregon might not be the place. Washington might be more of a place. Please take all of this with a grain of salt. Please don't plan any kind of traveling or moving based on just what you hear me say, okay? Please take this with huge grains of salt and use your common sense when it comes to planning for all this stuff. Absolutely use your intuition. Be mindful about it. Everyone's situation is going to be different. And here we come into the more violent parts of the United States that have consistently grown, curried violence, right? This is the burden that will never end for those particular areas, and it will go on for eras, okay? I'm going for 700 years or something like that, hundreds of years of never-ending burdens. Those areas are already in a bad place. They're 50th in the nation for education, for maternal mortality, for black maternal mortality, for infant mortality, for children in poverty. They're the worst in the nation. And this is just going to get catastrophically worse because the universe does not bless the oppression of the least of these, if you want to quote the Christian Bible, okay? We are called to protect the most vulnerable in our societies, and the structures, the monolithic structures, the oppressors that take advantage of the most vulnerable will never be blessed. They will be punished, and it will go on for generations. I do sense that resentment will build in those particular areas because they'll look over at the more stable areas of the United States and they'll say, well, fuck them. It's going to be a sour grapes kind of situation. Well, I didn't want that anyway, kind of thing. It's going to be all kinds of resentment. I wonder if that isn't where a lot of this whole Neptune and Aries, Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus and Gemini stuff comes from, that extreme levels of war. It's going to be extremely people are going to be extremely jealous of what more stable areas of the United States will have. We can talk about the Ace of Pentacles being not just about the body, but about those states having more money, just being able to take care of people because there will be more of a sense of community. As much as people hate taxes, they do pay for things that the most vulnerable in our society can't afford. I'll speak for myself and say that I have nice-ish healthcare, at least for the moment, because taxpayers are generous enough to buy that for me, okay? I need medication for the stuff that I go through, and if I don't have that medication, it does make my quality of life significantly worse. And I am grateful for the people who pay in their taxpayer dollars so that I can have that. I am grateful to that. Okay? Enough about me. I'm going to keep crying. This is going to be being forced to walk away from something that a lot of people still had a lot of emotional attachment to, but being forced to walk away because that situation is done. It's over. You can't have this anymore. It's been taken away from you. And I'm again talking about the states that have enjoyed the labor, the blood, the sweat, the tears of the most vulnerable in our societies, who we have made into contemporary modern day slaves. There are so many comforts that more vulnerable people have given the oppressors, and the oppressors have no idea and will not have any idea of what comfortable, sheltered lives they led until it's gone, until they're forced to walk away from this, and it's just so utterly over. And I think that that's also going to contribute to this growing sense of anger, spite, and jealousy towards the parts of the United States that have been kinder to their most vulnerable populations. I'll say right now that Texas loves to shit all over California because of, look at all their homeless populations, and California does not do a great job of taking care of its most vulnerable people. It does not do a great job, but it does a better job, in my opinion, than Texas does. My opinion, okay? May not be totally founded in reality for each individual, but as a whole, it's different. And California does a better job of taking care of its land. I've heard that from even Republican Californians, that they love their nature, they love their trails, they love how California takes care of the environment. And I'll tell you right now, Texas does not give a flying fuck about its environment. Galveston Bay right now has like bajillions of raw sewage pouring into its ocean, and people can't swim in Galveston Bay because they'll get fucking E. coli and shit like this, dude. I used to be able to enjoy Galveston Bay back in the 90s. You can't even touch the sand because it's full of shit. Quite literally, dude. I'm not saying it wasn't always like this, because Galveston Bay has always been like a filthy place. But you can look at like Texas Beach Watch, for instance, and you can see in the summer how it's like extremely polluted, but there are people playing in the ocean, playing on the beach, and then they get wildly sick, but the area doesn't want to say anything because the tourism is still something, they still need the tourism dollars. I'll say for Texas that this is a sick state when it comes to the environment, and that will not be blessed. And I can see how other states, how Texans will be jealous of other states when they see them enjoying their environments and taking care of them. Texas is going to say, well, why can't we have that? Because we've been shitting all over it now for decades. Excuse my throat. We're going to pull two from the top. We've got King of Wands. This is fire on fire energy, but it's in the upright position. This particular king is barely holding back. You see that clenched fist. He wants to move forward and do something, but he also knows that sometimes it's not a good time to move forward. It's good to stay seated and wait for the most perfect time to move forward. I'm going to go say that that's for the people who will need to know when it's time to move out of those most oppressive areas in the United States where it feels like the war is going to start and spread. This civil war that I feel like is supposed to be coming up. With all these astrological transits, no way in hell. Each individual is going to have to figure out when's a good time to save their own skin and save themselves. And not just their own skin, but the people, once again, who are most vulnerable. I'm wondering if it's not possible to take elderly populations, homeless populations, and bring them over to areas where they're not going to be crushed. I am deeply fearful for immigrants without papers here in the United States, refugees without papers. I am terrified for homeless folk. I'm terrified for LGBT folk, for folks of color. What can we do to get those people to higher ground with us? The universe will bless us if we see how we can help the most vulnerable populations in addition to ourselves. No way in hell will the universe not bless that behavior. Okay, King of Wands, you need to know when to take action and when to leave fast. That is fire on fire energy. If you watch a video of how fast a grass fire grows, you need to move with that kind of speed when it's time. Again, intuition is going to be absolutely of the essence. Mindfulness is going to be absolutely of the essence. This is not the time for our minds to become overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. Absolute extreme focus and being willing to take action when it's time to take it is going to be key. What was I saying about vulnerable populations? Nobody likes to be on the bottom, dude, and sure as hell they did not picture that for themselves when they were little kids, dude. We all started out with dreams and aspirations, and we need to remember that going forward. What can we do to keep the people most vulnerable in our society safe, not just with us, but for the future? Even if they pass out of our lives, they come into our lives for us to help them across whatever state line there is. And even if they pass on into somebody else's life, what can we do to make their lives better? Because most of us here in the United States are just one paycheck from being in this place where we're on the bottom asking for help from people who can provide it, okay? And if we can keep that in mind, if we can keep in mind that we all have a Chiron wound, there's community and understanding that. Absolutely pulling together for this first half of 2025 is going to be key. So I'm calling the first half of 2025 until June 15th. And take that with a grain of salt. I'm not saying precisely at June 15th at 12 p.m. noon, right? That kind of thing, because of course there's going to be spillover. It might come before June 15th, but that's what I'm giving like a rough guesstimate. The first half of, 2025, I keep saying January, the first half of 2025, what can we do to pull ourselves, communities together? And again, save the angels on the streets, right? Okay, I'm going to get into my third question. I'm going to gather up these cards, do a little bit of reset, and I'll be right back. Hopefully I get my throat clear too. So my next question is, what will the second half of 2025 most likely look like for the USA? Haven't shuffled yet, but let's go ahead and get started once again until Spirit asks me to stop. We have the Star in reverse. It's going to be really easy to despair, to feel like God, Yahweh, Buddha, Allah, whoever has abandoned the United States. And to a certain degree, I kind of get that, dude. How is the universe supposed to bless a nation that has pretty consistently been at war? For a nation that has consistently oppressed the most vulnerable populations, how is that to be blessed? In the second half of 2025, it's going to be losing sight of the stars, not having access to healing, even though the United States will be in deep need of it. It's going to be blocked away from us because this nation will not deserve it. And I'm speaking as the conglomerate, not as in the one stable parts, the stable parts and then the less stable parts. This will be healing so far delayed. There will not be balance. I kind of see this as the other side of temperance, if you will. We will be utterly blind walking through the second half of 2025. No hope. Despair. This isn't going to get better. This is going to get so bad, dude. This is going to get so fucking rough. For a lot of people, I do feel like the United States is going to struggle with suicide. I'm not monetized, so I can say that. The United States is going to struggle with people of all ages genuinely losing sight of all that's good, not being able to see. They're going to say, how does anyone ever heal from this? The star comes after the tower, and while I haven't pulled a tower yet, I may. People are going to ask, how the fuck is there going to be an after a tower fall like that? The aftermath will not be worth it. And they're going to leave this particular plane. In spite of how it is possible to feel with our feet through the water, through our intuition, a lot of people are just going to be in a state of dead flat panic. Not just despair, but panic. The United States, for many, many decades, at least, for a century or plus, has been highly sheltered. Americans don't understand what it's like to have their homes destroyed, to have their families destroyed by each other, let alone by another nation. I'm not saying that this is an overseas attack at all. I really do feel like this is going to be a civil war. People don't understand what that feels like. Even the most vulnerable populations have never seen entire neighborhoods destroyed by missiles or been mortared or anything like that. In many, many ways, this is a deeply sheltered society. There's nobody alive who remembers a time when civilians were attacked. Not even with the 9/11 attacks. Those attacks were going towards symbols of the state. They weren't towards civilians. They weren't towards homes. Those were collateral damage, okay? They weren't direct attacks on neighborhoods. I don't understand. We don't understand what it's going to feel like to have our homes destroyed, like a Palestinian might, for instance. I'm pulling from the top now. I pulled those two from the bottom. Here comes this card again, and I shuffled it too, okay? This is a burden that we cannot let go of, and I stand by my earlier assertion that we're going to see unprecedented rates of suicide in all kinds of groups of people. It was already rough before this, and a lot of people are going to say there's no point in going on any further. Again, these are our most vulnerable populations. I'm not saying that you can do anything to pull somebody from the edge, but I'm asking, what can you do possibly simply by being together in a community and paying attention before people get to that edge, okay? Possible. I'm hoping that it's possible. Here comes this card again. Endings and endings and endings. We can't go have fun anymore. We can't go out on the town. We can't hang out with family, with friends, let alone date, have fun with romantic partners. Isabel Mitten said at one point that casual sex is going to die out, and I wonder if this won't be part of that. It just won't be fun anymore. This is a lot of sword energy. Remember? I pulled the 8 of Swords. It's just not going to be fun to be alive in the second half of 2025. That doesn't mean that despair should be there. That doesn't mean that you should despair. This makes it harder to see the universe at work. That doesn't mean that it's impossible. Water is still at play here, even in this particular context. The challenges are in the distance, but the water is a little bit closer to that individual. The sun is rising, but it won't feel that way for a lot of people. In order to pull away from the despair, we are going to have to reach out to each other. And people who have more resources are going to need to help out those who have less resources in order to help people from feeling like there's no point. I can't go any further. Okay? Resources are going to be slim. Doomsday preppers will not have enough. And there's nothing to get anyone who even thinks that no one can fully prepare for what's coming up. Okay, and I've said that before in other videos. Again, having to emotionally walk away from a situation that we don't want to walk away from. We're going to miss the good. During the divided times before this particular era, this year I should say, people are going to remember the old times fondly, through rose-colored glasses, to be sure. But they are going to remember those times and say, we missed that. We missed the divided times when saying something could set somebody off, right? With just like an explosive anger, not with mortar shells, not with missiles, not with bombs, for instance. We've got 8 on top of 8. To me, 8 is about justice once again. Now that we had justice in reverse, as hard as it might be to admit this is our karmic debt. To not see anything clearly, to be in a state of panic, to be forced to walk away from emotional attachments that we're not ready to walk away from, to be crying as we walk away. The nostalgia will hit so hard for a lot of people, and I wonder if that's when a lot of people are going to say, enough of this mortal plane. I'm moving on. I don't want to watch this happen. This despair is the United States' karmic debt. Now, this is interesting. The 9 of Wands lands on top of the 10 of Wands. For a lot of people, they were already going through it before things really started to go haywire in the second half of 2025. And this is just going to be a never-ending burden. What can you do to help those people out? What can you do to keep them in your sense of community? Keep them in a sense of community no matter what. Even if they feel like they're alone, what can you do to help support them even in their aloneness? Because that might mitigate something else, not just from someone's suicide, but from them being the lone wolf that commits some act of terror. Okay? People have had it already. 2025 hasn't really started yet, but people will have had it by the time the second half of 2025 starts, and they won't want to feel more of a burden. They won't want to get started on this journey of carrying this pile of sticks up a steep hill. I have one iteration of this particular card where it is an individual with a heavy load of sticks on his back, and he's climbing on his hands and knees up a mountain. They're not going to want to start that, but what can you do to share that load with them? Say, we are all in this together. We have to all be in this together in order to survive this. This is worth surviving together. We have the Queen of Wands. We have quite a bit of wand energy, not just sword energy. But this is not about gender, okay? This is about fire and water once again. We had that earlier come up with the King of Cups in reverse. This is the Queen of Wands upright. She's very beautiful, and this isn't just about us seeing people for who they truly are, seeing the beauty within them, but it's also about respecting the magic within each of them. That's about respecting their ability to act autonomously while also being deeply in touch with their emotions. What can we do in spite of what we're being forced to leave behind? In spite of being heavily burdened with a burden that we can never get rid of completely, right? How can we grow into not just emotional maturity, but mental maturity when we know when to take action and when to stay seated? It's also about taking care of our animal friends, if you will, having a deep connection with our animal friends. In many, many ways, our animal friends are our companion pets, and I wonder if getting in touch with nature, an extension of both the sunflowers, and the cat, I wonder if nature won't give us some sense of groundedness. At least we can protect this, because we are going to need to be incredibly strong to go through this particular end of an era. This is going to be a vicious end of an era. Second half of 2025. Absolute emotional maturity. Everyone has their own balance of masculinity and femininity. It is a binary with at least the Rider-Waite-Smith. But everyone has their own mix of it. And a lot of people deny one side or the other in order to give off a sense of security that they don't actually have. This is asking you to burn all that away and be your true, authentic self, both someone who's willing to take action or stay seated when it's time, but also feel their way through what's coming up, even in spite of how very painful this particular ending will be for everybody, not just for a few people, not even for like the most oppressed amongst us, right? It's going to be painful for a lot of wealthy people, well-off people as well. This is going to hit everybody to one degree or another. We have the Seven of Swords. The phrase, never let a crisis go to waste, comes to mind right here. Keep in mind that there will be people who will be contributing to this sense of despair because they'll be cashing in on all the destruction going on. I've said in an earlier video that the leaders of this particular country throughout 2025 will be encouraging this civil war that we see being described right here. And I see more of that. I see people taking advantage of, again, more vulnerable people, not just the most, but more vulnerable people, like the shrinking middle class, for instance, going to be taking advantage of those people for personal gain. Never let a crisis go to waste. Be aware of that and be willing to look at the whole situation from another angle entirely. This particular person has a halo effect around them. This is a holy entity, if you will. He is being divinely suspended for the moment. There's nothing you can do about those people who will rob the country as well as more vulnerable individuals. There's nothing that we can really do. Now keep in mind that justice is not out of play right here, that karma is absolutely watching every single thing that this person does. What we need to do is take a look at the whole, and not just the people who are taking advantage of us, not just the wars that are being kicked off here and there throughout the United States in the latter half of 2025. This is asking the universe to show you through spiritual downloads, again, that mindfulness, that intuition comes into play, asking the universe to show you, where is all this going, and how can I play a role towards my best and highest good and others' best and highest good? What can I do to let go of the despair of so much catastrophic loss? A lot of people are going to lose everything because they're going to have to get out of the way of conflict inside hours, overnight. That's going to be absolutely earth-shattering for a lot of people, even for people who didn't have much. That little bit is all it's going to take for them to come into a state of suspension, being forced to stop and look at the whole situation from a different angle altogether that they didn't expect to see. You do need to take a spiritual path here. This hanged man is willingly doing this. His hands are behind his back. Presumably they're not tied. He's holding them together. And one foot is kind of crossed into a 4, making a 4 out of himself. 4 is the sign of the Emperor, stability. There is deep internal strength in choosing to look through things through a different angle. And earlier we had the strength card, but it was in the reverse. It's going to take strength that you didn't expect you yourself to have in order to choose to look at everything from the angle of, this is not the end. And by the way, these are not at all the end times. Okay, let me just get that out of the way. In spite of the despair, in spite of being forced to leave things behind that we still had great emotional attachment to, we can choose to still receive from the universe downloads that help us explain what's going on and also help us see more clearly our next steps forward. I've got one more question, and then that'll be it. I'm going to reset my cards, okay? So I'm going to let go of the Rider-Waite-Smith for this last question. My question is, what can you, as someone living in the USA, do to navigate 2025 the best that you can? I am choosing to use the Sufi Wisdom Oracle. And once again, I shuffle until Spirit asks me to stop. I find these cards to be both honest and gentle and loving at the same time, and I absolutely think after this reading that we deserve it. The gift of freedom comes in breaking away from your attachments. On multiple occasions, the Eight of Cups came up in reverse that talks about the emotional attachments. All those cups are upright. They have not been spilled, and yet we're being forced to walk away from them. This is being forced to walk away from a sense of security, money, those things that kept us attached to, things we took for granted. In a sense, that is where the Hanged Man comes into play, is seeing letting go of all those attachments as a way to freedom. And it's not going to feel that way. It's going to really sting. It's going to hurt, and possibly for a long time. Everybody's on their own healing journey, but ultimately the universe wants you to look at that as a way of being freed from stuff that no longer serves you. And I would expect to see that with Pluto in Aquarius, okay? We've got return to joy. That last one that I read about, where it was about despair and about a lot of people leaving this mortal plane because they genuinely saw how much worse things were going to get. They didn't want to experience it anymore. You're still being asked to return to joy throughout 2025, including the latter half, okay? It says we are to experience joy no matter what. One of the poems in the Sufi Wisdom Oracle instruction booklet talks about even if you have to dance in your own blood, we are still here to experience joy, as hard as that may be. Beyond the ego, surrender to the flow of life. Nothing is meant to last forever. Everything gets swept away eventually. All structures are impermanent, as Eckhart Tolle says. Letting go of the things that we were objects that we were emotionally attached to will be part of this, but also seeking the, not destruction, but seeking the shrinkage of ego, of the things that divide us. Ego is what makes us our own worst enemy, and what makes us so divided is our ego, our lack of spiritual, emotional, and mental maturity. When we start to head towards ego shrinkage to the point where it becomes such a minute part of us that it doesn't inhibit us, it doesn't inhibit our sense of community, that's where the true freedom lies. I am asking you, I've already asked people in the past in other videos, I'm asking you to seek a meditative practice. I'm doing the same thing. I'm loving using Insight Timer. Works on a variety of devices, and it's free, okay? I'm using the free version. This is not sponsored, but I have found it to be incredibly helpful setting up a daily meditative practice. I am also seeking the end of my ego in order to keep myself away from division, to keep from being my own worst enemy. This is absolutely something to strive for because it brings you ultimate peace, and it offloads the karmic debt that you might have incurred if you had done damage in other people's lives, intentionally or unintentionally. Okay? One more. Limitation is power, and that's going to feel really, really weird to a lot of people because freedom, especially for Americans, is something that we claim, at least, to put on a very high pedestal. I don't know how much that is the case with this particular. I don't know that a lot of people are going to feel that. It says to lean into your limitations. And this is where we start to lean into the limitations that keep us boundaried away from others, away from community. It's not just our political divisions, it's the divisions that things like the internet has put on us. The internet has put us in silos away from each other, and it's done that for quite some time, and I don't think people have noticed that. Limitation is power. When we are forced to come down to our innermost strength, when we are forced to rely on community, that's where the true power lies. And that is what the Hanged Man is going to reveal to us if we are willing to stop and not continue to struggle, okay? The Hanged Man was chill, and he was being blessed with that halo around his head. He is being blessed in his ability to chill out in a decently uncomfortable position, right? It kind of sucks to be inverted. If you practice yoga, being inverted for too long doesn't feel great. The blood rushes to your head. It's not going to feel fantastic, spiritually speaking, being inverted. And that's still when we're asked to look at the situation from a different angle and say that the universe is working something out. And if we protect our most vulnerable populations and moving to higher ground, we will be blessed. It was a heavy read, folks. I hope that you got something from it. I would love to discuss this reading with you in the comments down below if you feel like it. No matter what happens this year, it is not over. These are not the end times. We have many, many tens of thousands of years to go before the last soul is finally reincarnated into a place where they don't have to be reincarnated anymore. They go into the unknown, the cool stuff, right? There is no need to continue to learn karmic lessons. We have many tens of thousands of years before that happens. So keep that in mind. This is the end of an era for the United States. I do see the United States no longer being united. Now, whether it gets split into 5 separate nations, that remains to be seen, okay? But in the meantime, despair is not worth keeping around. If it flows into you, let it flow out and ask the universe what you need to feel, what you need to think during these really, really powerfully times of great upheaval, okay? Thank you for watching to this point. I hope that you have a good day.